Hello and welcome to the next video in the online Paramics Workshop series. In this video, we will look at vehicle behavior and lane choice on approach to junctions. If you haven't already, I recommend checking out the earlier videos in this series, which were recorded by Malcolm Calvert, and go through Paramics news and new features in the software. So I am Graham Smith. I'm an experienced Paramics modeler who often takes part in the workshops, and I use Paramics extensively in my day-to-day job. Now, unfortunately, my computer doesn't have a camera, so I'll just be recording my screen during this video. The video is being pre-recorded, but as they are being premiered live on YouTube, then you can ask questions in the chat and one or more of us will be on hand to answer them. We will also collate any questions throughout the series and have a question and answer video at the end of the workshop run. So as I said, we are going to be looking at vehicle behavior on approach to junctions. This is the model we're going to be looking at, and we're going to focus on the northern approach to this junction. The first thing I'm going to do before I even look at the Visualize tab is just check if my vehicles are able to see the hazards associated with this junction. I'm going to check the signposting distance related to these hazards. So if I turn on hazards with the hotkey H and click on this node that forms the junction, it's this one here, left click, and I can see the shaded links which show how far back vehicles can see the hazard associated with this junction. If I look at the north arm, then it's shaded in all the way back here, which seems about right. They can start to make their lane choice decisions related to this junction right the way back here. Next thing I'm going to do is go to the Visualize tab, and I'm just going to start this playing. And what we should see is some slightly odd lane changing behavior around here. You can see there's something strange going on here, and there's possibly something odd going on around here. So we're going to look at these in more detail and try and tidy this up. So the next thing to do is mark the vehicles. So when I'm looking at it like this, it's kind of hard to work out exactly what's going on because you don't know where these vehicles are coming from or going to, and therefore you don't know what lane they should be in each individual vehicle. So what I'm going to do is use vehicle marking to make this a lot clearer. So I'm going to just pause it, go to Visualize and vehicle marking. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to color vehicles coming from the north and turning left in one color, coming from the north and going straight on in a different color, and coming from the north and going right in a third color. So the way I do that is I hit Add under vehicle marking. So I've added one rule here, and I want to select the condition associated with that rule. So if I click on this drop down, I'm going to select the From To option. And what I want to what I want to put in is marking for any vehicles using this link here. So this is link 1443 to 1462. So if I type this in here, 1443 to 1462, what this is done is it's colored in green, which is the color selected here, any vehicle that is going to use this link. So this link here will be any vehicles left turning from the north. So if I go back, I see there's one colored in green there. So that I know now that that vehicle is going to come down here and turn left. I'm going to do the same for the straight aheads and the rights. I'm going to add another rule, change the color. This time I'll pick yellow and change the condition. So I want straight ahead vehicles. So I know that anything coming straight ahead from the north has to use this link here, 1443 to 1449. So 1443 to 1449. And I'll see I've now got vehicles colored in yellow. And finally, I'm going to add a third one for vehicles turning right. So that will be link 1443 to 1444. So same thing again. There we go. So I've now got vehicles on the north arm colored in 3 different colors. This is really powerful, this tool. It really helps you see what's going on and makes it a lot easier to work out what to do to improve your behavior. So if I just turn my vehicles off for a second, what I can see is at this junction here, there's 4 lanes at the stop line, and I've got lane 1 is for left turns only, lanes 2 and 3 are for straight aheads only, and lane 4 is for right turners only. If I put my vehicles back on, I can see I've got yellow vehicles, which are the straight ahead vehicles in lanes 2, 3 and 4. Now if I play this on a bit, what I should see here is some very odd behavior with these yellow vehicles switching from lane 4, there's a HGV here, just switching into lane 3, and I've got another vehicle stuck here that's going to have to switch across. So I want to address this behavior so that my yellow vehicles are only in these 2 lanes. So I'm going to check the lane range of the vehicle. That's the function that tells the vehicle what lanes they need to be in. So on this section, the lane range of the vehicle should be 2 to 3 because they can be in either lane 2 or lane 3. So if I click on this vehicle, I can see the lane range is 2 to 3. If I play on until I get some yellow vehicles in this lane, click on one of them, its lane range is 2 to 3. Although it says it's in lane 4, which is correct, but the lane range is 2 to 3. So it knows that it needs to be in lane 2 to 3, but for some reason, it's got stuck in lane 4. So if I move back a bit and watch the vehicles at this point, so if I watch this yellow vehicle here, what I can see is at this node, what I would want to happen is any yellow vehicle in lane 2 to just continue on in lane 2. But this vehicle here is actually switching out into lane 3. So I can see that happens pretty much every time, and then sometimes they'll switch back. In fact, if I turn off the vehicles, you get a bit of a clue here from the trajectories, which show the trajectory coming down, and vehicles in lane 2 are staying in lane 2. Now, what's happening here is that I've got coded a lane gain. So it goes from 2 lanes to 3 lanes at this point here at this node. But as there's no wide end coded on here, this is a lane gain. This will be operating in the model as a lane gain to the left, but actually it should be a lane gain to the right so that the straight ahead vehicles know to carry on in lane 2. So all I need to do is add a wide end on this section, which should help the yellow vehicles to stay in the correct lane. So all I do is I go back to Edit Network, left click on this link and select Properties, toggle on Wide End, and I'll see the wide end appear there. And now if I go back to the Visualize tab, hit refresh, I can see the wide end has appeared. And if I hit play, vehicles turn back on. What I can see is that vehicles will now, if they're yellow, generally carry on in the correct lane. Which is good. So the behavior there is improved. Now, what I have seen here, though, is that even though this vehicle crossed correctly over this node, 1459, it now has moved out to lane 3. So if I click on it, what I can see is its lane range on this link, this short section here of 3 lanes, is actually lane range of 1-3, which means that vehicles that are going straight ahead down here think they can be in any of these 3 lanes, whereas in reality, I really want them to only be in lanes 1 to 2 on this section. So if I watch this vehicle, it's going to get sort of stuck here and then force back across. There we go. You can see the same happening a little bit with some of these yellow vehicles, and it's because their lane range in this section is 1 to 3, and then on this section is 2 to 3. So I've got 3 lanes worth of yellow vehicles, which are then forcing into 2 lanes on this section. So the lane range here is incorrect. So the way I deal with an incorrect lane range is to add a hazard override. So a hazard override looks at the hazard that a vehicle is going to have on a downstream link and applies a different lane range to an override link. So I'll show you what I mean using this example. So if I go to hazard overrides, open it up, I get this new dialog box, hit add. So what I want to do is pick my downstream link, which is this one here. So it's 1460 to 1443. So 1460, start typing in and it'll appear here. And what I want to say is any vehicles in this link, which have a lane range of 2 to 3, which is these yellow ones here, make them on this link have a lane range of only 1 to 2. So this link here is 1459 to 1460. Make them have a lane range of 1 to 2. So both my downstream link and my override link have to have hazards associated with them. So if I turn it on, obviously my downstream link has these hazards associated with them, and my override link, this one here, has this widen associated with it. If you pick a override link that doesn't have a hazard associated with it, it won't work, and you'll get an error. But as I've set it up here, it should work okay. So I'm just going to refresh this and play it again. Wait for some yellow vehicles. So this yellow vehicle now should hopefully on this section have a lane range of 1 to 2, and you can see it does, and then it carries on 2 to 3. So my yellow vehicle behavior is a bit better across this section here. So I can see the vehicles moving through in 2 lanes there rather than using this lane. So if I move back up my network here and keep playing and look around node 1461, what I'll see is a lot of lane changing across this node, particularly from the yellow vehicles cutting across. So if I select a yellow vehicle here, I can see its lane range is 2-3, 2 to 3, which is correct. And then it jumps across and its lane range is 1-2. So what I want to happen is vehicles in these 2 lanes to just carry on and stay in the same lane. But vehicles in this lane that are yellow are cutting across. Now, the reason for this is because on this section, the vehicles are in lane 2, and that's fine. And they know that on the next section, they can also be in lane 2, and that's allowed. But they sort of cut across in order to stay in lane 2. But what I really want to happen is vehicles from lane 2 to go into lane 1 and lane 3 to go into lane 2. So there's a simple fix for this. I'm just going to add in next lanes. So if I go to edit network, look at this node here, I'm going to turn the node off actually, and look at my lane points, and to add a next lane, which forces vehicles to stay in lane across a node, all I'm going to do is select this first lane point, hold control, and left click the second one. I can see I've got a white line appear between them, which indicates the next lane. If that hasn't appeared, it may be that you've got next lanes turned off. So Shift N for next is the hotkey for next lane. So if I hit that, I can toggle them on and off. And I'm just going to put one on this lane as well. And if I go back to my model, go to visualize and hit refresh and hit play, what I'll see is the yellow vehicles are now just staying in lane across this node, and I'm not getting that lane change behavior. So I've improved my behavior for my straight ahead vehicles. I'm now going to have a quick look at the right turners and the left turners. So the right turners are colored in red, and I know they need to be in lane 4 at this point. So I click on one, lane range 4 to 4. And if I follow them back, then I want the red vehicles to always be in the outside available lane. So at this point, it's in lane 2 because that's the outside available lane. Then it goes into lane 3 and then 4. And if I go even further back until I get another one, here's one. There we go. It's in lane 2 follow it all the way through. Lane 2, lane 2, lane 2, lane 2, 3, 2, and I can see it's always staying in the outside lane. So the calculated lane ranges for the right turning vehicles in this instance is correct, and I don't need to make any changes for those. But it's worth checking just to make sure. The left turning vehicles, so I coloured them in green. So I've got one here. Its lane range is 1 to 1 at this point, which is good. So it's only in lane 1 because that's the only one available. If I watch that, I should see them always getting into lane 1 at this point for that turn. If I go a bit further back, wait for a green vehicle to appear. Here's one. Still in lane 1 at that point. And I go a bit further back again. Wait for one to emerge from the zone. Here it is. So its lane range is 1 to 2 here, so it can be in both lanes at this point. You see it changed to the outside lane there. Still in both lanes. Still in both lanes, so that's 2 to 3 now because of the restriction. Still in both lanes. And it's not until this point that it sees that it has to be in lane 2 to 2 and then 1 to 1. So actually, although from this point down, the lane range is correct, from this point up, the lane range is incorrect. So as with the yellow vehicles, what I want to do is add in some hazard overrides just to get the lane range correct from this point back so as that the vehicles will stay in the correct lane back and to up to this point where they see the hazard. So I'm just going to go back to hazard overrides. So if I go model hazard overrides, and again, I'm going to use this as my downstream link. So it's 1460 to 1443. In this instance, my downstream lane range that I want to use is 1 to 1, so that's the left turners. And what I'm going to do is, at this point where the lane range is incorrect, vehicle, here it is. Yep, so it's incorrect here. Apologies, that's 1 to 2. So on this link, 1470 to 54, I'm going to change the override lane range to 1 to 1. And if I refresh that, that should change the lane range of vehicles on this section that are green to 1 to 1. So here's one. So it's 1 to 1 on this section, which is good. But although I've improved it on this link, I've not quite got it correct yet, because on this section, I can see the lane range is still 2 to 3. And on this section, it's still 1 to 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to add in 2 more hazard overrides, one to deal with the lane range on this link and one on this link. So I'm going to take the one I just created and right click on it and hit duplicate. I'm going to keep the downstream link the same. I'm going to change the override link to 1469 to 1470. And my override lane range on this section needs to be 2 to 2 because of that restriction. And then I'm going to duplicate it again and do one for this link, which is 1468 to 1469. And this time change my override lane range to 1 to 1. So if I save that, hit refresh, hit play, what I should see is if I get a green vehicle all the way back here, there's one, there we go. As soon as it gets a lane range, I can see its lane range is 1 to 1 on here. It should be 2 to 2 on this next section, which it is, and 1 to 1 down. So I've used the hazard override to correct the lane range for my left turning vehicles. And I hope that was all clear with the hazard overrides. As I say, please type in any questions in the chat if you have them. So in summary, if you watch your model and you see some issues with lane changing, lane use, what I'd suggest is to go through the following steps. Check your hazard length can the vehicles see the hazard as far back as you'd like them to be able to? Check the lane range of your vehicles to see if this is correct. And if it is correct, try and work out what is causing them to be in the wrong lane. In this instance, we used a wide end and next lanes to allow vehicles to stay in the correct lane. If the lane range is incorrect, have a look at using hazard overrides to correct the lane range. There's one final thing that I'm going to show you, which I'm going to show you in this model. If I go to the Visualize tab, and I've set up vehicle marking so that vehicles coming north along here and turning right, this junction are coloured in yellow, and vehicles heading northbound up here are coloured in green. If I play it and watch the behaviour around this node, you see there's quite a bit of lane switching. So this green vehicle will probably switch over lane. So it has, and any yellow vehicles in the inside lane will switch over immediately into the next lane now. So if I select a vehicle on approach to this node and look at its lane range, it says all. Now, what that means is that the vehicle can use all the lanes, and effectively it means it's not under the influence of any hazard. So it could be that the signposting for this junction for these hazards up here doesn't extend back to here, but if I turn on my hazards and click on some of these junctions, you can see that this signposting certainly does extend well beyond there. So it should be under the influence of the hazard, but for some reason it's not. And that is caused by this hazard at this node here, turn lanes. So we'll see as the vehicle gets past that, once it gets into this lane, its lane range is correct, so it's 1-to-1. But every vehicle in this link has a lane range of all. And as I said, it's because of this turn lanes hazard. And what that does is it effectively breaks the hazard propagation. Now, these appear when you are changing your model. So what's happened in this situation is I have had a hazard here. So it could have been a widen or a junction or signals or something. And what in the process of coding my model, that has been removed, but the hazard itself is still hanging around in the model, causing this issue. So what I want to do is get rid of this. And it's very straightforward to do. And all I need to do is go to Edit Network, turn on the hazards here, select this link here on approach, and just change the number of lanes to anything else. So it's currently 2, so I'm just going to change it to 1 lane. Change, and you see that the hazard is now changed. It's now changed to a widen. And if I change it back to 2 lanes, change, you can see there's now no hazard here at all. If I go back to visualize and refresh, the hazard is gone. And my vehicles on this section now have the correct lane range. So green vehicles will have 1-to-1. And yellow vehicles 2-to-2. And the behavior after this node is much improved. So if you see a turn lanes hazard in your model that is not associated with another hazard, so for instance up here, I've got a hazard that says turn lanes, but there's also a near side turn, that will be fine, that'll operate okay. So if you see a turn lanes hazard on its own, on a normal node or a compound node, then you need to have a look at it, and probably you'll need to remove it using that method I showed you. So the method is to generate a hazard and then change it back. So increase the lanes and decrease them back. One thing to note is you do see turn lanes hazards by themselves at roundabout nodes, and these are fine. They will operate correctly, and that's not something to worry about. It's only when you see them on their own at normal or compound nodes. So that's the end of this video. Thanks very much for joining us. I hope that has been helpful. If you've got any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or send them to Paramics support. And we'll be back at the same time next week for another workshop video.